Anyway, thank you to all of you. I know it's a weekday and it's in the middle of the pandemic, which never seems to end, and very cold day. So thank you so much. You could take time out and come and join us to exchange some ideas. So as you know, we try to hold these monthly Zoom town halls to hear the ideas and skills from people who have spent some time in different kinds of professions. So today we are actually very fortunate to have one of our very own local leader, Mr. Brad Butt. Mr. Butt is currently the VP of Government Relations and Stakeholder Relations with the Mississauga Board of Trade. So he understands deeply the economy of the region, economy of the city, and what makes it go. And prior to that, between 2011 and 2015, Mr. Butt was also Member of Parliament from Mississauga. And prior to that, Mr. Butt has a very long history of community leadership positions and volunteer positions. So today we are fortunate to have somebody to spare their time and come and speak to us. So thank you, Mr. Butt, and the microphone or the stage is all yours.
Well, listen, everyone, thank you very much for the kind invitation to join you. I want to congratulate Engage Peel for what you are doing, which is how do we bring more people together and get them more interested in particular municipal politics, where you know, we don't always find lots of people coming forward to offer themselves to serve in our community. So I think this is great. I'm glad you're doing this on a monthly basis or more, and I encourage you to keep it up, and particularly because we are in municipal election year this year in 2022. You're probably all aware that October 22nd, I think 2022, is the Ontario municipal elections. And obviously that will be Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon, because this is Engage Peel, will all be electing their mayors and their members of regional as well as local council. So I was very pleased to get the invitation to join you today. And I'm going to say a fair bit. I'm not going to take a lot of time, but don't hesitate to interrupt me if there's something I say and you want clarification or you'd like to ask a question on a point I've made at that point in time. Just go right ahead. Let's consider this an open, you know, informal kind of discussion, and we can go from there. I was going to start by providing sort of some of my personal background in politics and in the community, and then I did say that my main remarks were going to be about how important I think it is for people to be involved actively in their community before they seek public office, and why that's important and why that gives you credibility as a candidate, because obviously you're running to win. You're running to win, you're running to serve, and that's important. Running to, you know, put your name on the ballot for the sake of putting your name on a ballot, if that's your thing, then good luck to you. But most people are running because they want to serve. They have a desire to make their community, their city, their province, their country a better place. And I believe that's most, if not all, candidates sincerely believe that. So in my case, I always tell the story. I wasn't actually born in Mississauga, even though my family dates way back in Mississauga. When my parents got married, my dad accepted a job, and they both were from the Port Credit area of Mississauga. My dad accepted a job in Eastern Ontario, and he had to be stationed in Ottawa. So I was actually born in Ottawa, ironically going back to serve in Ottawa in 2011. So I was actually born in Ottawa. But then my parents decided to move back to Mississauga, which was our home. So I was 6 months old, my parents moved back. So I like to tell people I've lived in Mississauga my whole life, but that would be I got muted. Sorry. There. That wouldn't be 100% true, because I was actually 6 months old when I moved back and lived in Mississauga. I'm 54 now, and so I've lived in the city of Mississauga for 53 years and 6 months, and been actively involved in this community. So when I started to get interested, both in politics, but also what was going on in my community, the first thing I did is I started to look at things I could do to volunteer. What kind of organizations that I believe in? So I was at my own high school. I ran for my school council. I eventually became the president of my student advisory council at Gordon Graydon Secondary School in Mississauga. And through that, actually became a founding member of Mayor Hazel McCallion's Youth Advisory Committee when she started that in 1982. Now, I know there's probably most of the people on the line that weren't even born in 1982. But having said that, I started by being a volunteer in my community through things that were being set up by the city and by the local community that I grew up in. And I'm so fortunate to have served on the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee, and then eventually served a 2-year term as the chair under the leadership of Hazel McCallion, and learn more about my city, learn more about the community, learn more about other organizations that were doing such great work in the city, like the Food Bank and like the Crime Prevention Association and like, you know, other organizations, sports groups, cultural groups, and others. And that really gave me I think, a strong perspective on what was going on in my city. And plus, I was meeting people. I was meeting people and learning about them and learning about our community. And I tried to use that for an opportunity to continue to serve. Then when I was 21 years old, the city councillor who had been a longtime city councillor in the area I grew up in Applewood Acres, Dave Cook, he decided in 1988 to not run again. So there was an open ward. And we'll talk about running campaigns later a little bit, and the opportunities that present themselves when a sitting councillor decides not to run again. But there I was, 21 years old. I was working for a marketing and development company at the time. And all of a sudden, the city councillor in the area I'd lived my whole life in as a young person decided not to run again. So of course I put my name on the ballot. Now I didn't make it, ran a good campaign, worked hard, knew lots of people, but I didn't win. I actually finished third. The guy that won was Nando Yanika, and I think a lot of people know who Nando is. He went on to represent that ward for 30 years after he beat me in 1988. And of course, now he's the chair of the region appeal. So you just never know where politics is going to go. But I learned a lot about that, and it was an interesting experience, obviously, to run. So when that was over, again, I stayed involved in my community. I volunteered for all kinds of different organizations. I've been on the board of the Arts Council, the Sports Council in Mississauga. I was the Peel Children's early years champion, set up the early years centers in the region of Peel. These were all volunteer things that I did in the community while I was establishing my private sector career and working, and we can get into that later. You can ask me about that if you want, but I want to focus on why it's so important for people who want to run for public office to do the grunt work and the volunteer work in your community before you put your name on a ballot. It builds a network. It gives you credibility. People can see you've made a commitment to something to make our community, our city better. And many of these community organizations are crying out for volunteers who will serve on their board or will be involved in one of their campaign events to help them raise money or awareness. So I always say to people, I used to have a lot of young people come in and see me when I was a member of parliament who were interested in politics, and they would say, what do you think I should do? I said, you should go out and volunteer and do something you're passionate about. If you're passionate about the environment, then get involved. If that's your issue, that's great, do it. If you're passionate about social justice, go out and be part of an organization that champions that kind of thing. If you're passionate about sports and recreation and building that in our community, then go and do that, because you're going to meet people, you're going to learn more, you're going to be more involved in what's going on. It will make you a better candidate when you do decide to run, particularly in municipal politics. And we'll talk about why that's different than provincial and federal in a couple of minutes. But that's what I did. And even when I lost elections, I didn't just say, well, I'm out of here, like I'm done. I stayed involved. I said, well, that's fine. I didn't win this time. Somebody else won. There might be a chance for me to do something else down the road again. But I stayed involved. I kept involved in community organizations and my local ratepayers, a residents association in the community that I lived in, or got involved in other organizations when people called me or tried to recruit me to be involved. So I talk about this a lot to people. You know, be involved in your community, make a difference, make a name for yourself, because then people are going to know you. And then when you do decide to run, you've got lots of people you can call on, or people are going to come to you because they're going to say, look, I know this guy. I know this lady. They have worked so hard in our community. Wow. Wouldn't they be a great person to be on our city council or on our school board, or, you know, whatever it happens to be. So I always say to people, you know, keep involved. And even if you run, you don't win, you don't just quit and say, well, I'll sit it out for 4 years till the next election. No, get involved in your community, you know, make a difference, do something. So one of the big challenges with municipal politics is name recognition. I mean, people just don't know who we are. I mean, they might not know Brad Butt from a hole in the ground, or Joe Blow, or whoever it is, right? So how do you gain name recognition? Well, you only gain that by, again, being involved in your community, meeting as many people as you can, interacting with as many people, being very active on social media. Again, promoting things going on in your community, because that builds credibility with folks when you talk to them. Municipal politics is very different than provincial and federal because we don't have political parties. And, this is good and bad in all the political parties. I don't really care which political party it is. I mean, some people luck in, they win a nomination in a political party, they're a nobody, and bang, all of a sudden they're an MP or an MPP. Other people have worked their rear ends off for years. They'll run in a nomination for a political party. They may win or not win. They may not or win the general election, depending on which political party people want to vote for at the time. But municipal politics is very different because it's all about you. It's about you as an individual. It's about the current incumbent, if they're running again, and what their track record has been. But what do you bring to the table? So how are you going to prove to people in your community, you know the issues, you understand the neighborhood, you live there, you eat, live, breathe, and sleep what's going on in that community? Because that's important in municipal elections. I've run in a couple of elections where, if someone didn't live in the ward, that was, people got all worked up about that. Oh, I'm not voting for that person. They don't live here. Where you'd never hear about that in a federal or provincial election. Nobody would ever raise that. But I mean, God forbid you ran in, well, take the ward I live in, Ward 11. God forbid you didn't live in Streetsville and you were running to be the councillor for Streetsville. I mean, like, people would just say, well, who are you? You don't live here. You don't understand our issues. You don't understand our community. Well, some people might say that's unfair, an unfair judgment, but I'll be honest with you. That's how people vote. That's what they're concerned about. They want to know you live here, you understand the issues in this community, you live, as they say, live, eat, breathe, and sleep it every day. So that's important because municipal politics is very different than provincial and federal. And with a turnout in municipal elections of between 23 and 27%, unlike a federal election where it's like 65% voter turnout, it's very different. It's very tough to engage the electorate at a municipal level than it is at the provincial or federal level. So what I try and say to people all the time is the same thing. If you are serious about wanting to represent your community at the municipal level as a councillor or as the mayor or a school trustee, you have to be involved in your community. You can't just say, wake up one morning, I'm going to run. You won't win. I'm going to tell you right now, you might do okay, not going to win. The public needs to see your credibility, your commitment, and your involvement. So, I mean, I would hope for any of you looking at running, whether it's this municipal election or 4 years, from now again, anywhere in Peel region, that's my advice to you, good, bad, or indifferent. I really think that look at the community you want to run in, understand that ward, understand those communities, and work on them and be involved and let people interact with you and talk to you and listen to them, listen to what they're telling you about their community. That'll make you a far better candidate and likely a candidate that can win. The last thing I'll say is, I mean, this is one of the unfortunate realities, or fortunate, I guess, if you're the incumbent. It's very difficult to beat an incumbent in municipal politics unless there's been some huge issue or some other, major problem that's happened. That is one of the realities of municipal politics. We have a councillor in Mississauga retiring this year, Pat Sato. I mean, she's been a longtime friend of mine. I don't live in her ward. I've never voted for her, so it doesn't matter to me. But even if Pat were running again this time, she would clearly win again. And she's in her mid-70s. The reality is in politics, municipally especially, incumbents tend to win. Yes, they have name recognition and other stuff, but the incumbent councillors have done a fairly good job. The people reward them by re-electing them. They have a measure of comfort. But if it is an open ward and it's a brand new opportunity for anybody, then that really is a good opportunity for you to look at running, offering yourself and being involved. So that's just a little bit of advice for me for what it's worth tonight, and happy to take questions from anyone. But good luck. If any of you are seriously looking at running, as you're probably aware, under the Municipal Elections Act, May 1st, nominations open. You can apply to run for the October 22nd election. So if you're planning on running, you should start to think seriously about it now. Get your ducks in a row, get organized, get your team together. And then if you're ready to register on May 1st, then you certainly should get your signatures and your $100 ready to go, and get it submitted into the clerk's department, and you'd be off to the races, and you can start to legally campaign. Anyway, other than that, I'll open it up if there's any questions or comments, but thank you for inviting me. I hope that's been helpful, but stay involved in your community, stay involved in your city, be active, let people know who you are, and all of that will lead to success down the road, I'm fairly sure.
I think I saw one hand up, but it's down now. Anyway, so I will probably get the ball rolling. So, Mr. Butt, as you sort of gave a brief history of all the different positions you have served in, usually people are motivated by a thing or an issue. So, what was the thing that motivated you to run for office from the local to the federal one?
Well, the first time I ran municipally, as I mentioned, when I was 21 years old, it's because, the incumbent councillor who I knew and I grew up with in my neighborhood decided not to run again. I think if I'd ever thought in my life I was going to run for city council for the first time when I was only 21 years old, I probably would have told you were crazy. but the opportunity opened up and I ran. Of course, it didn't work out. But as I moved along, I was always a member, and people join political parties for different reasons. But I was always a member of the Conservative or Progressive Conservative Party, as the names have changed over the years, both provincially and federally. I always worked and volunteered on campaigns to help and support other conservatives and progressive conservatives over the years. And then there was an opportunity for me prior to the 2011 federal election. I was actually approached by the Conservative Party to consider running in the Mississauga Streetsville riding. The riding was held by a Liberal MP at that time. And of course, the election was likely coming because there was a minority parliament. And I was encouraged to run. I put my name forward. The party nominated me to be the candidate. And then, of course, May 2nd of 2011 was the election. And I got elected as the Conservative Member of Parliament for Mississauga Streetsville. So there wasn't really any divine strategy around that. Sometimes in politics, you fluke into these things. I always wanted, from a young kid, I always dreamed about being a member of Parliament. I've been to Ottawa several times in my life. Was at the Parliament buildings, was always enthralled and intrigued by that. I love this country. I've always wanted to serve. The opportunity came up. I ran, happened, to win, and got that opportunity and that honor of serving my community, for 4.5 years as a member of Parliament. So I wouldn't say it was a divine plan, but it was maybe a bit of a fluke to some degree, but it was a great opportunity, and just thoroughly enjoyed my opportunity serving the people of Mississauga in the House of Commons.
Thank you. And to all that, those who are joining us, you can ask a question, or if you don't wish to, you can send it to me via chat, and I am glad to ask on your behalf. And sometimes my next question actually is, I'm sure you have heard that one of the main criticism, especially at the municipal level and especially in Peel, we come to hear in Brampton as well as in Mississauga that the council doesn't reflect the community. And it's not diverse enough. And when I talk about diversity, I'm not only talking about ethnic diversity. That's just one component of diversity. The youth, the women, people with the different abilities. You have had a long career, and along the way, do you think there are any systemic things that could be improved to encourage, say, for example, young people or women to step forward? Do you have any suggestions for the current decision makers or the people who might be thinking about running for the office, how to attract a more diverse slate of candidates?
Well, generally speaking, I think candidates get elected on their merit and on their background and what they've done to contribute to their community. Mississauga, I don't know why Mississauga takes such a beating over not having diversity over many years as a council. How many years did we have, and we still have, a woman as the mayor? I mean, Hazel McCallion won in 1978. Nobody elected women in municipal politics in 1978, and she served for 36 years. I would call that diversity. We had the first Black member of council elected in Cliff Giles in 1984 or 85, and he served as a city councilor. Mississauga City Council has been more than 60%. This current council, not exactly the same balance, but over 60% of the councillors for the last 30 years in Mississauga have been women. We don't see that in other councils in Ontario, but Mississauga has been. Now, can we do a better job? Should our council better reflect the community? I mean, we have Councillor Demerla now, obviously of Indian heritage, so a woman of color that is on our council now. We have had many candidates run from very diverse communities and run, and some have come very close to winning. Why they didn't win in their individual wards, I mean, I can't tell you. I only know where I live and where I vote. Look at the diversity we have now of federal MPs and MPPs in Mississauga. It's never been more diverse. It's never been more diverse. And that represents two different political parties, one provincial and one federal. So, we're getting there. But, I still would hope that all of us as voters still vote for the best candidates in our ward, in our community, regardless, of who they are, which again gets back to what I was saying at the beginning. Be involved in your community, build a reputation, show people you understand the issues, show them you can be a strong member of city council or an MPP or an MP, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, I mean, we've got more work to do on the diversity front. But people who suggest Mississauga hasn't done a good job on diversity and gender balance and other stuff of folks who have been elected to all levels of government, I actually think Mississauga has done a pretty good job, all things considered. I can't speak for Brampton as much because I don't know it as well, but Mississauga, I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think Brampton is, many people claim Patrick Brown is the first ethnic mayor of Brampton. So.
Well, he's the first brown mayor, right?
First brown mayor for sure. Thank you.
And I serve with Patrick as an MP in Ottawa. And Patrick Brown is an outstanding individual. He was a great member of Parliament. I had that opportunity to serve with him. I don't know how he's been doing as mayor of Brampton because I haven't paid attention as well, but he is a good, decent guy. I've worked with him and he understands diversity issues well, as our mayor does, Mayor Crombie, and has tried to work on some of those issues and bring communities together.
Thank you. And Mr. Butt, you alluded to the fact that municipal politics are different because we don't run along party lines, and obviously that means no nominations. That means usually for any council seat, the list of candidates running is pretty huge, up to 20 people at Mississauga, Brampton, and that sort of complicates the situation. As you might have seen in the US, especially in the US and New York City being one of them, there has been a very strong movement towards ranked ballots, and we had our London City Council go that way. Would you like to share your thoughts, ideas, or do you think that could be one way to, I should say, create competition for the incumbents? Because now people can really sort of rank the ballots. Their ballots would not be just wasted if they cast a ballot for somebody who may not be winnable on the first ballot. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know these ideas have come up. We even had a municipal a provincial referendum a number of years ago on mixed proportional representation and all these other models that would work. I'll just give you my personal opinion. I'm not a supporter of ranked ballots. I'm not a supporter of mixed proportional representation. This country, whether we like it or not, is built on the British parliamentary democracy system, which is first past the post. And that is how we've run this country. I think we're one of the most successful democracies in the history of the world, even if we don't always like the outcome. I still think most people that wind up winning municipal elections, if we're going to focus strictly on municipal right now, I think most people who win municipal elections, even though our voter turnout is very low and maybe the person didn't get 50% plus one of the votes, I still think the voters that voted generally have reflected the will of the voters and of the community generally on who's been elected. I think very few people would say, well, I don't think Brad Butt should have won. I wish there'd been ranked ballots so I could have voted to make sure the guy in fifth place on the first ballot wound up being first on the last ballot. I don't hear anybody talking about that. You run, you get as many votes as you can, you win, you serve, and if you're not doing a good job, they should boot you out in the next election. I mean, that's really the way it should be. So I'm not a personal believer in those systems. I think our system right now, first past the post, which has been our history for 150 plus years in this country, should continue, because I just don't see a better system making a difference.
Actually, in the chat, Rahul asked a good question, and I think so. Given that you stand on the ranked ballot, so Rahul had a question that should the party nominations be also run on the first past the post, and because currently they are run on the ranked ballots.
Well, I don't know. I can only talk about the Conservative Party. I don't know how the other parties do it, but as far as I know, when you run for a nomination to be the Conservative candidate in any riding, if you get the most votes, you're the candidate. I don't believe the Conservative Party changed to ranked ballots for candidates running for a nomination. The Liberal Party or the NDP Party or Green Party may have done that. I don't know, but I don't believe the Conservative Party has. But you know what? That's a decision for those political parties. And if that's the system they want to run, God bless you. I mean, like run what you think is right, for your political party. But I'm not sure that I want to go into vote in Ward 11, let's say where I live, and see 17 names on the ballot and be asked to rank them 1 to 17 when I probably don't even know who 15 of them are. I'm going in to vote for George or Fred or Samantha or Lucy. That's it. That's who I'm going to vote for in a municipal election, because that's the candidate I know. I know them, they knocked on my door, or I got their brochure in my mailbox, or they're my next door neighbor. I'm not sure I don't think I want to do municipal elections with ranked ballots. I think it's chaos.
Okay, Mr. Bhatt, you mentioned that very one sort of idea to acquire leadership qualities or prepare for a bigger office or public office is to volunteer in the community. Lot of people in the community, and particularly so among ethnic communities and the newcomers. Usual question is, how do they connect? Where do they find the position beyond their immediate faith-based or community ones? Is there some sort of a central posting space run by the city or run by any NGO? If there is none, do you think there is a scope for some sort of a central public space where those who are looking for volunteers, they could post there, and people who would wish to volunteer there and could go and see if any volunteer position matches them? So could you please fill us in on that?
Well, one of the best places to go to is an organization called Volunteer MBC. It used to be called the Volunteer Center of Peel, but it's now Volunteer MBC, which is for Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon. They have a central database of all of these nonprofit organizations and charities that are looking for volunteers. That is absolutely a place you can go. Number two, you could contact the United Way. It's now the United Way of Greater Toronto. It used to be United Way of Peel, but there was an amalgamation a few years ago. So the United Way, because many of these organizations are United Way funded organizations. Or you know what? Just Google, I'd like to volunteer in Mississauga. See what comes up. If any of you have financial backgrounds, every single charity and nonprofit organization I have served on over the last 35, coming up on 40 years, they're all looking for people with financial background, because they all need treasurers. And they all need someone who can read a monthly financial statement and explain to it and make sure the organization is running successfully. So my goodness, if any of you have any, and you know what, it doesn't mean you have to be a CA. I'm not talking about you have to be a chartered accountant or that level, But boy, if you've got any ability, there are so many organizations, right? From the food bank to Distress Line to Appeal Children's Aid to there's all kinds of organizations, and they're all crying for people who have got some financial background, who can serve on their board and can help them through the financial aspects of the organization. So there's lots of ways you can reach out to offer yourself and register yourself as someone who would like to volunteer in the community. If you're in your own local neighborhood, regardless of where you live, most neighborhoods will have a residents association. Often you'll get a newsletter in your mailbox from them. And they're always saying, we're looking for people to serve on our board. Pick up the phone, send them an email, say, hey, look, I live in this community, I'm interested. How can I get involved? Again, go and Google it. I mean, just Google, I live in Meadowvale. You know, what volunteer opportunities are there in Meadowvale or Port Credit or Brampton or whatever? And you'll be surprised what comes up. And then just offer yourself. Just say, hey, I'd like to be involved. I care about this community and I want to be involved, and how can I help?
Thank you. Something very interesting question came by, and so Mr. Butt, you have been almost lifelong, not almost lifelong resident of Mississauga, and also now you're working with the Mississauga Board of Trade, which is the which has the pulse of the local economy. So, as a resident of Mississauga, this election cycle, what are the 3 top issues for you as a resident of Mississauga? Number 1, based upon your role in the business trade of Mississauga Board of Trade from the economy perspective, and then 2nd, as a resident, and 3rd, if you could pretend to be a young person. So what would be the 3 most important issues that you think in Mississauga for the coming election?
Yeah, sure. Happy to give my personal opinion on that. Number 1, that Mississauga continues to be a strong, sustainable city and livable city in many different ways. And that can just be, we need more green space, we need more, opportunities for livability, we need affordability, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But we want Mississauga to continue to be a very successful city in many ways, where you can live, where you can get a decent job, where you can raise your family, and where you can retire in dignity too, if you still want to keep living in Mississauga in your retirement days. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, I think, infrastructure and making sure that we're keeping up with what the needs are for infrastructure in this city. And that means greater investments in public transit. We will have the Hurontario LRT coming in a couple of years. We will have more investments in public transit. We want to make this a city where you can be able to move around and interact and do things and not necessarily have to rely on your car, an Uber, or a taxi, that you can get around and you can be part of the city of Mississauga and have that level of connectivity in that way. The 3rd issue, and this is a tough one, and all levels of government are dealing with this one right now, and I don't have the answer, but this is a big problem, and it's a big problem for younger people, is affordability. It is, and I hate to say this, because when I grew up as a kid in this city, nobody talked about this. It is impossible now almost to buy a home and live in this city. My daughters are 22 and 18. My 22-year-old daughter is actually renting a condo in Toronto now because she works for a downtown Toronto design firm. She hasn't got a hope in hell of buying a house in the city of Mississauga. Even if she had a partner and they combined their income, she's single, but they combine their 2 incomes, they would never be able to buy a home in the city of Mississauga. And that is shameful in many ways. Like, I think of my life now, it's different for me, right? I own my own condominium, I live here, whatever. But the fact that people can't afford to live and work in Mississauga is, I think, the biggest challenge that we have right now. And I don't know what the answers are, but we're going to find that young people in Mississauga are going to move away. They're not going to be here. And if they're like me, third generation now, Mississauga based, and now my kids can't afford to live in the same city that my grandparents lived in, my parents still live in, that I live in, I'm ashamed by that to some degree. And I'm not blaming anyone in particular. It's just the reality of where the world has evolved. But we've got to come to grips with this issue, because people are not going to be able to afford to live and work in Mississauga if we don't find some way around this. And I think that affects young people way more than it affects, 55-year-old Brad Butt. And we've got to do better.
Wow, I could sympathize with you when you were telling the story of your daughters. I thought you were telling the story of my daughters. So we are all in the same boat.
All in the same boat.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Any other question that you would like to ask, or you would like me to ask from Mr. Butt? You can please send me comments in the chat section that housing crisis is no longer crisis. That's an understatement. We crossed that term a while ago.
It's beyond a crisis now.
It is beyond a crisis, and I think.
I mean, even today, or I guess it was yesterday, I was on a call, and people were stopping in the middle of it with pins and needles, worried about whether the Bank of Canada was going to raise the interest rate. Like, that's how serious a problem this is. And the interest rate at the bank is 0.25%. And there were still people worried that it might go to 0.5%. And then that would affect mortgage rates and like this meeting I'm on with these people from the Chamber of Commerce, and everybody was seized by this. What's the governor of the Bank of Canada going to say when interest rates have never been lower in the history of our country, right? But housing affordability has never been more out of reach for people. So it's this massive disconnect we have in so many ways. And again, I'm not blaming anyone in particular. This is just how it's evolved. And to think about this housing affordability issue, not just for people who own their own houses right now and are worried about if they still have mortgages, worried about where that's going, but young people who will never, ever, ever be able to afford a home of their own. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
No, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I think when it comes to housing, it's a very big issue. Maybe we can hold a town hall with a few more people in that area. It's my personal opinion that any community which has no space for its young is doomed. That's not the way to build communities. And as a nation, and as a community, as a province, I think we have to make a very hard decision. What are the houses meant for? Are these meant for people who live in those houses, raise families, build communities, work in those communities? Or these are just like stocks and mutual funds and gold bars for people to stock their wealth, and most of the time, the wealth from very far away lands who have no connection to this one. So those are very fundamental, rather philosophical questions that probably we never had to face. But as a community and as a country, I think the sooner we make those decisions.
If anyone has the magic answer, you'll be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Bring it on.
Sure. Yeah. Anyway, I think there are more questions. So thank you, Mr. Butt.
My pleasure, everybody. Keep up the good work you're doing. I think it's so important that we have engagement like this, and we have people talking and listening and being part of, greater community engagement. And obviously we'll see more of that as we move towards a provincial election in June, and obviously a municipal election in October. So congratulations to all of you for being part of this Engage Appeal movement, and keep involved, because our community is only going to be as great as the people who make a commitment to make it work and make it better. So stay involved, and I appreciate you inviting me to join you tonight.
Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. And
Yeah,
also thank you to all those participants who spared your time. Thank you so much. And
Okay.
we will meet in the next Zoom town hall meeting. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.
Good night.